Book of Heaven Volume 2, Call of the Creature to the Order, the Place and the Purpose for which he was created by God, by the servant of God Luisa Piccarreta. Page 45-51. June 11, 1899, The Light in Order to Comprehend Luisa. My sweet Jesus continues to make himself seen only very few times, and almost always in silence. I felt my mind all confused and full of fear that I might lose my soul and only good, and about many other things, which it is not necessary to say here. Oh, God, what pain! While I was in this state, he made himself seen for just a little. He seemed to carry a light, and from that light many other little globes of light were coming out. Jesus told me, "Remove every fear from your heart. See, I have brought you this globe of light to place it between you and me, and among those who approach you. For those who approach you with an upright heart and to do good to you, these little globes of light that come out, will penetrate into their minds, will descend into their hearts, will fill them with joy and with celestial graces, and they will comprehend with clarity that which I operate in you. Those, then, who will come with other intentions, will experience the opposite, and will be dazzled and confused by these little globes of light." So I remained more tranquil. May everything be for the glory of God. June 12, 1899, Jesus himself prepares her for communion. This morning, having to receive communion, I was praying good Jesus to come to prepare me himself, before the confessor would come to celebrate Holy Mass. Otherwise, how can I receive you, being so bad and not disposed? While I was doing this, my Jesus was pleased to come, and in the very act of seeing him, it seemed to me that he did nothing but dart through me with his gazes, most pure and sparkling with light. Who can say what those penetrating gazes operated in me, letting not even the shadow of a little speck escape? It is impossible to say it, rather, I would have wanted to let all this pass in silence, because the internal operations of grace can hardly be expressed as they are with one's mouth, rather, it seems that one would counterfeit them. But Lady Obedience does not want it, and when it is for her, one must close one's eyes and surrender without saying anything else, otherwise, woes everywhere. In fact, since she is a lady, by herself she makes herself be respected. Therefore I continue. In the first gaze, I prayed Jesus to purify me, and so it seemed to me that everything that shadowed my soul was shaken off of it. In the second gaze, I prayed him to illuminate me, because, what good comes to a precious stone from being pure, if it is not sparkling so as to capture the gaze of those who look at it? They will look at it, yes, but with an indifferent eye. Much more was I in need of that light, which would not only render my soul resplendent, but would make me understand the great action I was about to do, since I was not only to be looked at, but identified with my sweet Jesus. Therefore, it was not enough for me to be purged, but also illuminated. So, in that gaze Jesus seemed to penetrate through me, just as the light of the sun penetrates through crystal. After this, seeing that Jesus continued to look at me, I said to him, "Most loving Jesus, since you were pleased first to purge me, and then to illuminate me, be so kind now as to sanctify me, more so, since I have to receive you, who are the Holy of Holies, and therefore it is not right that I be so different from you." So, always benign toward this miserable one, Jesus leaned toward me, took my soul in his arms, and seemed to retouch it all over with his own hands. Who can say what those touches of those creative hands operated in me? How my passions, at those touches, put themselves in their place. My desires, inclinations, affections, heartbeats and my other senses, sanctified by those divine touches, changed into something wholly other, and, united among themselves, no longer clashing as before, formed a sweet harmony for the hearing of my dear Jesus. It seemed to me that they were like many rays of light, which wounded his adorable heart. Oh, how Jesus amused himself, and what happy moments those have been for me. Ah, I experienced the peace of the saints. It was a paradise of contentments and of delights for me. After this, Jesus seemed to clothe my soul with the garment of faith, of hope and of charity, and in the very act of clothing me, Jesus whispered to me the way I was to exercise myself in these three virtues. Now, while I was doing this, unleashing another ray of light, Jesus made me understand my nothingness. Ah! I seemed to be a grain of sand in the midst of a most extensive sea, which is God, and this little grain went to dissolve itself inside that immense sea, it dissolved in God. Then he transported me outside of myself, carrying me in his arms, and kept whispering to me various acts of contrition for my sins. I only remember that I have been an abyss of iniquities. Lord, oh, how many awful ingratitudes I have had toward you. While I was doing this, I looked at Jesus. He had the crown of thorns on his head. I stretched out my hand, and I removed it from him, saying, "Give the thorns to me, O Jesus, for I am a sinner. The thorns befit me, not you, who are the just one, the Holy One." So Jesus himself drove it onto my head. Then, I don't know how, I saw the confessor from afar. Immediately I prayed to Jesus that he would go to prepare the confessor to be able to receive him at communion. And Jesus seemed to go to Father. After a little while he came back and told me, "I want the way you deal with me and with the confessor to be one, and I want the same from him. He must look at you and deal with you as if you were another me, because, since you are victim as I was, I want no difference at all, and this, so that everything may be purged, and my love alone may shine in everything." I said to him, "Lord, this seems impossible, that I may deal with the confessor as one does with you, especially in seeing the instability." And Jesus, "Yet, it is so. True virtue, true love, makes everything disappear, destroys everything, and with enchanting mastery makes God alone shine through all of its operations, and it looks at everything in God." After this, the confessor came to call me to obedience and then celebrate Holy Mass, and so it ended. Then I listened to Holy Mass and I received communion. Now, who can say the intimacy that passed between Jesus and me? It is impossible to manifest it. I have no words to make myself understood, therefore I let it pass in silence. June 14, 1899, Jesus wants to chastise the world. This morning, most loving Jesus would not come. In my interior I kept thinking, how is it that he is not coming? What is new now? Yesterday he came so often, and today, the hour is getting late, and he has not yet showed himself at all. What heartbreak! What patience it takes with Jesus! It seemed to me that my whole interior was taking up arms, for it wanted Jesus, and it waged such a war against me as to give me pains of death. My will, superior to everything, tried to put peace by persuading my senses, inclinations, desires, affections and all the rest, to calm down, for Jesus would come. So, after prolonged suffering, Jesus came, carrying a cup in his hand, full of coagulated blood, putrefied and stinking, and he told me, "Do you see this cup of blood? I will pour it over the world." While he was saying this, Mama came, the Most Holy Virgin, and my confessor together with her. They prayed to Jesus that he would not pour it over the world, but have me drink it. The confessor said to him, "Lord, why keep her as victim if you do not want to pour it over her? I absolutely want you to let her suffer and to spare the people." Mama was crying, and insisted with Jesus, and with the confessor, that he would not give up praying until Jesus would be content with accepting the exchange. Jesus insisted that he wanted to pour it over the whole world, and at first he almost seemed to frown. I saw myself all confused. I was unable to say anything, because the sight of that cup full of blood, so ugly, was so horrifying as to cause my whole nature to tremble. What would it be to drink it? However, I was resigned. If the Lord would give it to me, I would accept it. Who can say, then, the chastisements contained in that blood, if the Lord would pour it over the world? It seems that from this very day he keeps the hail prepared, which will cause great damage, and it seems that it must continue in the following days. But then Jesus seemed a little bit more calm, so much so, that he seemed to embrace the confessor because he had prayed to him in that way, however, without coming to any conclusion on whether he would pour it over the people or not. So it ended, leaving me in indescribable pain because of what may happen. June 16, 1899, chastisements are necessary in order to humiliate the creatures. He still continues to make himself seen with the intention to chastise. I prayed him to pour his bitternesses into me, and to spare the whole world, and if this were not possible, to spare at least those who belong to me, and my town. The intention of the confessor also seemed to unite to this intention. So, it seemed that, conquered by the prayers, Jesus poured a little bit from his mouth, but not that cup mentioned above. That little bit he poured, he seemed to pour in order to somehow spare my town, though not completely, as well as those who belong to me. However, this morning, I myself have been a cause of affliction for Jesus. Since after he had poured I saw him more calm, without thinking I said to him, "My lovable Jesus, I pray you to free me from the bother I caused to the confessor of having him come every day. What would it cost you to free me yourself, releasing me from that state of sufferings yourself, just as you yourself put me in it? Indeed, it would cost you nothing, and if you want, you can do everything." But while I was saying this, Jesus' face turned so afflicted, that I felt that affliction penetrate deep into mine most heart, and without telling me a word, he disappeared. How mortified I remained, the Lord alone knows, thinking, especially, that he might not come any more. However, after a little while he came back, but with greater affliction, with his face all swollen and full of blood from offenses he had just received. All sad, Jesus said, "Look at what they have done to me. How can you say that you don't want me to chastise creatures? Chastisements are necessary in order to humiliate them, and not to let them grow bolder."